Hello, and welcome to our video contemplation of day signature 64. This frequency corresponds to the Four of Hearts, the prime instinct to receive, and the heart virtue of marriage. It is represented by the angels of celebration and imagination.
Mm-hmm. So we have the 42nd angel of celebration, who walks the pathway of wonder to become the embodiment of growth.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the 64th angel, the last angel, of imagination, who walks the pathway of thanksgiving to become the embodiment of prayer.
Yeah. Okay, so 64. 64 angels.
Yeah.
Day signature 64. It's kind of a special one. I can't help but admit that this is one of my favorite frequencies, one of my favorite positions in the Liberated Tarot. And of course, this is tempered by the fact that I say that about almost every position, depending on my mood and what I'm excited about in the moment. But there's a lot happening here, and it's all yummy. And it reminds us of the angels. This number 64, we have arrived at a culminating moment in this sequence in that we're working with the 64th angel, and whatever happens tomorrow is going to take us somewhere other than the 65. Like the 65 tomorrow is going to be a different blend of angels. There is no 65th angel. So this kind of direct correlation between the frequency of the day and one of the angels splits and starts doing something different tomorrow. That something different, again, is a function of the crystalline codex, the very specific way in which these angels have assembled themselves in relation to the Liberated Tarot. That whole mechanism was revealed to us. We're responsible only for having found it, and now we get to work with it. So for whatever it's worth, this 64th angel is an important moment in our movement through the 64 angels.
Yes.
It's the angel of imagination. There's a lot to see here today, beginning with the number 4, 4 of hearts.
Yeah.
We have keynotes for each of these numbers. What are the 2 keynotes for the number 4?
So for 4, we have discipline and foundation. Discipline's a little bit of a surprising word.
Yeah.
But foundation is pretty traditional. When we think of the 4, we think of structure, we think of stability, we think of building.
Yeah, we think of the square.
We think of a square. Exactly. So foundation is pretty straightforward. And basically what we're seeing here is what we're going to discover here today is what is this foundation? And also, why is discipline required? Yeah.
And what is meant by discipline? It should be fairly obvious at this point based on how we use words, but we're not referring to being disciplined or punished.
Right.
Discipline is the other definition of discipline. It's dealing with some cultivated tendency, some intentional act, which begins to make some more sense when you think in terms of foundation, when you think in terms of building. You will never complete building a structure unless you're disciplined to see that structure through step by step to its end.
I think a good example of foundation, especially in the context of the 64 angels, is what they told us is the ultimate foundation, which is enjoyment.
Yeah.
So if we can build our lives on that foundation, it's solid.
That's awesome. That's absolutely right. And there's your discipline too, because what is, for whatever reason, the last thing we tend to remember, especially in those cases where we're feeling worried or we're feeling bent out of shape for one reason or another? It's that we get to enjoy that this life is a gift, that the miracle is unfolding before our very eyes. It does require, at least at first, a degree of discipline, even just to remember that in the flow of experience. So you're starting to get a sense for why these words play out here in the 4. We move beyond this into the prime instinct to receive. There's a receptive nature inherent to the foundation of everything. Even in life, if you think in terms of polarities, you have yin and yang. You have the receptive element and you have the expressive element. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, it's a pretty clear understanding at this point that yin came first. That void of it's not a void, it's an infinite expansive possibility. It reads like void because it's
the infinite sea.
Yeah, the infinite sea, that comes first, and everything that can be expressed is then expressed from that beginning point. So we find that here at the very beginning, there is receptivity. There is this openness to experience and this willingness to express, but it begins here. Mm-hmm. That's foundational. That's a part of this. If you're a builder, you're going to need to be open to the plan, to the blueprint, mm-hmm. before you can begin to build anything. At the very least, you're going to need to be receptive to some guiding impulse that ultimately produces something. If it's a house, you work with a blueprint. If it's a sculpture, you're working with some other guiding element within you. But in any case, there's this openness to receive insight, intelligence, data. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of what we find here as well. It's very obvious at the foundation of things. Mm-hmm. Since we're in the hearts, we're dealing very specifically with an openness of heart, a willingness to receive the subtle, essential data of life, those invisible aspects of life. You don't get to see them, you don't get to touch them, but you do feel them. And frankly, you feel them more deeply and more directly than something you could see or touch. The heart must open to the richness inherent to life itself before you become capable of effective response. You need to be willing to receive before you become capable of response. That's, again, where we begin to see some of these foundational points of connection in these words. Mm-hmm. Anything more you see in that?
Well, I definitely see this prime instinct to receive connecting to another angel we've had a conversation with.
Okay.
Which is the angel of worth.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
The pathway of receptivity.
Yeah. Okay. That's a very significant connection to make that we should make right at the beginning, basically, because it's one of these connections I see us returning to over the course of the conversation.
Absolutely.
This is another one of those instances where there's no direct connection between the two angels of the day or the frequency and any of our 10 sessions. However, there are thematic connections which have become very clear to us that point very specifically at a certain part of one angel's conversation. The angel of worth spoke about its pathway of receptivity, and it taught us what it means to receive. On the one hand, it said that your receiving is certain. We are all constantly receiving all of the time. We're swimming through an ocean of information. That information is coursing through us all the time. Most of it we're totally unaware of.
Right. So we're actually always receiving
yes.
what we are requesting from life, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it. Most of the time, we're actually unconsciously requesting from life and then receiving what we requested. But what the angel of worth is actually pointing out is that, what we request from life is a combination of unconscious and conscious, and that we essentially what we know to be true about ourselves forms the mold that life then fills with what we're requesting in that sense. So our sense of self, our concept of ourselves, is exactly the mold that life then fills with what we are requesting.
This angel in this particular session does a very good job of leading us through a logical sequence of ideas that land at the culminating moment, the mic drop moment of what Laura has just described. It helps us to understand exactly why this is the case, why it is, in fact, our own self-concept that determines the quantity and quality of life that we receive, the content of our experience. That may seem like a tough pill to swallow at first, and it may seem like a really random connection to draw. All I can say is, 1, read this session. Study. You heard me talk about this yesterday. Don't just read it, study it. Study the session, take it point for point. Mm-hmm. Ensure that you really understand each point before you move on to the next. And then witness how inevitable its conclusion is. So there is a difference between receiving and receptivity. This is something that the angel speaks to as well. Receiving is certain. All of us are constantly receiving. The moment your eyes open, well, even when you're sleeping, of course, you're constantly receiving. All of this energy and information is always moving through you, and you're making use of it whether you're aware of that or not. The pathway of receptivity, which is what the angel represents, is a matter of choosing what you will receive, choosing which parts of all that information you will make your own. that pathway of receptivity is a pathway of conscious participation in that sea of exchange that is life.
Mm-hmm.
You choose to essentially metabolize the best parts, to bring them into yourself and allow them to become a part of yourself, and to release all the rest as waste, as having no part to play in your story. That process is always happening based upon the ideas you hold, based upon the ideas you hold about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that metabolic process plays out whether you're aware of it or not. But when you become aware of it, you can begin to craft the mold, so to speak, of that process so that you are metabolizing those things you align to or align with or benefit from or want to be aligned with, and release everything that is not equal to that. Becoming conscious in that flow is what the angel is talking about, and it's telling us exactly how to do that. Its point is that once you know that your self-concept is central to your experience, it's the very
foundation.
Creator of, the foundation of your experience, you know exactly where to go to work in order to alter the content of your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Quality and quantity, both will change. If you believe yourself to be a limited container, your access to life now squeezes into the size of that expectation. If you know yourself to be large, you literally take in more life. So we are dealing both in terms of quality and quantity. Quality being good life versus an uncomfortable one. Quantity being a small container versus a large one. We have to work on self-concept in both directions, expanding our sense of ourselves and perfecting our sense of ourselves so that it becomes more beautiful and more expanded over time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the angel talks about. This leads us to the heart virtue of marriage, because if all of this is true, then ultimately this heart virtue of marriage is about realizing that you are married to some ideas and not to others. Those ideas that you are married to are a part of your experience for as long as you remain in that marriage, so to speak. As long as you continue to subscribe to any idea, it is a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a choice. And, well, it can be a choice. It ought to be a choice.
Right.
That's a part of what this day signature is about. It's about raising this to the level of our conscious awareness so that it can become a choice, in which case we can choose to release what doesn't serve us and marry what does.
Right. Yeah, and I think the pivotal key point here is realizing that we must take ownership of our power to choose and choose whenever we have the opportunity, whenever we see the opportunity to make a choice, to decide what ideas we want to be married to.
Absolutely. That connects to the word receive too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you've been given a great deal of power here. Will you receive that gift of power? Will you do something with it? We've learned over and over again that the best way to honor any gift is to make use of it, to enjoy it, to become involved with it, to care for it. This is the most fundamental gift of autonomy, of freedom, of complete access to participate in your own life experience. This is what it means to be a creator. And something about the Four of Hearts is speaking to this on the most fundamental level. It's about building your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're building that life not only from here, but from here. This is the connecting point. This is why we find all of this here in the hearts. We've met this idea that self-concept is central to our experience previously, and we begin to work with it intellectually. But where we become capable of working with it efficiently is here in the heart, because it's this part of us, this seed of knowing that we were speaking about yesterday, that actually permits us to begin orienting those ideas, those concepts, that thinking in a direction that is in fact aligned with our best interests.
Mm-hmm.
It's this part of us that knows whether something is true or false, whether something is going to be constructive or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we involve the heart in the work we've been engaged in leading up to this point, we close that final gap that it's like the last key in the lock before the door opens. And now we have all of the resources we need in order to become the effective, productive, creators that we were born to be, that we inherently are. So that's a part of what we're dealing with here. I'd love to read a few lines from the Angel of Worth. Again, at the very outset of this conversation, it seems important to lay this groundwork as explicitly as possible. And in sharing these words, we hope that it feels exciting and intriguing enough to follow those words through to a study of the entire session, because it's well worth the time it takes to, at the very least, read and contemplate. So a few of the things it says. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think we should begin here where we kind of set the definition.
Okay. So this line reads, that which knows, capital K, knows, is your I am awareness, your complete sense of self, both subconscious and conscious combined. That which knows is your I am awareness. So that part of us that we've spoken about this recently, this I am awareness, we've connected it to the frequency portal, that part of you that says, I am Timothy, I am Laura, or I am scared, or I am large. Anything we connect the words I am to becomes a part of us. Here we find the marriage, and the angel just in a single line describes this. That which knows is your I am awareness. Now, you can think you know all manner of things. But when you connect anything to your I am awareness, you are presuming to know something, whether it's helpful or not. That's the important part here. The capital K knowing is connected to that seed of intelligence within you that knows the truth, capital T, truth.
Right.
Until you're aware of this, though, we tend to meet our experience knowing all sorts of things which do not serve us. But if we're connecting that power of knowing to something that doesn't serve us, we then produce the experience of that knowing in our life, because that's how generous life is. It gives us whatever we say we know, whatever we agree to, whatever we are married to in this regard, right? And it goes on to explain this. It says, if what you know is rooted in fear, love, or life produces the specter of fear. If what you know is rooted in absolute truth, love produces the absolute truth. You're going to get whatever it is you're requesting. It says, in this way, your awareness composes what life in its love must fulfill. I'll read that one more time. In this way, your awareness composes what life in its love must fulfill. Every knowing awareness produces a mold life fulfills. Love is life flowing into the molds you have set for yourself. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
This is just, I'm reading the session at this point. Your awareness relates to yourself. What you know summarizes yourself. This is interesting. You are the only one producing this awareness for yourself, and that awareness can adapt to whatever you choose. If you don't know this, then your awareness of yourself is a constellation of other opinions, of external authorities, having nothing whatsoever to do with the truth about yourself. And so your awareness of yourself in this context would be limited to the opinions of others. The moment you recognize the power that we're being reminded of here, you've found a ground or a foundation that you can begin to build from on purpose. You can begin to craft a new narrative, a new understanding of yourself. You expand and refine your self-concept. This is the work of the frequency portal. This is the work of crystal self. This is the work of seer training. This is the purpose of everything we've been led to create and offer to you. It's because of sessions like this. They're cluing us into something. We're living with that idea for long enough to validate it in real life, and then we share it as quickly as we know that it is in fact viable in practice. So it goes on. I'll read just a couple of more lines. It says, every knowing awareness produces its own sense of self. Every self, then, produces a world. This is the clinching line. Your own sense of self is the mold that configures your world. If your sense of self then is small, love responds to confirm what you know. You feel small. You experience a world that is as small as you expect it to be. If your sense of yourself becomes large, love responds to confirm what you know. In every case, whatever it is you are saying you know, whatever it is you're connecting to that I am statement, life says, you got it. Absolutely, yes. It always says yes. The reason it always says yes is because if you're telling a story that is small, inevitably, given enough time, given enough experience, even given enough discomfort in that tiny cage, you will inevitably begin to expand your sense of yourself. Life knows there is no loss in this game. There's no way to screw it up. No matter how small, how scared any of us becomes, there comes a breaking point. There comes a breaking point in our awareness where our awareness breaks open to something larger than what we've known. Mm-hmm. All we're doing, and all we're inviting you to join us in doing, is becoming proactive about that. We're choosing not to wait until everything breaks down to such a great extent that we have no alternative but to look up.
Right.
We're saying let's avoid that. What is that called? It's like when you bottom out or the ground. There's a phrase for that. Mm-hmm. Hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
Let's avoid rock bottom altogether and begin building upward from now before it hurts. Let's recognize the power that's been afforded us and utilize it effectively now.
Right.
And even if we're not perfect at that right out the gate, that's fine. We're learning how to reclaim something that we have not touched in a long time. It's like it's become atrophied. Mm-hmm. And so we have to start just moving a little bit.
Right. And I think those muscles that we're learning to use are perfectly represented with these two angels.
Absolutely.
Celebration and imagination.
Yes. This is the best part of this conversation. We're spending a lot of time laying this groundwork because ultimately the punchline is so delicious that until you know how powerful this beginning point is, this foundation is, the simplicity and gift of that punchline won't land as completely as it deserves to. Mm-hmm. But at this point, I would say we've laid enough groundwork. We realize that our own ideas about ourselves set the limit on what it is that we experience. And that as our ideas become more beautiful, we become more beautiful and our life becomes more beautiful. As our ideas become larger and more gracious, so do we, and so does our lives. We're all mirrors externally of the world we've produced internally. We now know that we get to produce that world. We're not victims of some world that someone else produced. We are the only ones capable of reproducing that inner experience, and thereby we are the only ones capable of reproducing the outer experience. Mm-hmm. We know this now. So the big question is, how? Mm-hmm. If it's that central, that significant, if my whole life literally depends upon this, how do I expand that self-concept? How do I improve that self-concept? Because my life literally hinges on this. Mm-hmm. So what do I do? The angels that we find here today answer that question. Yeah. So let's reintroduce the angels by name, pathway, and embodiment. Would you mind rereading those for us?
Yep. So the 42nd angel of celebration walks the pathway of wonder to become the embodiment of growth. And then we also have the 64th angel of imagination who walks the pathway of thanksgiving to become the embodiment of prayer.
That's right. So the big answer to the biggest question we could possibly be asking is found here. You've heard us talk about the path of wonder many times, how in life we meet this binary choice of just two options. At any given milestone, at any given point along the way, we have one of two options, and we decide over and over again which of these options we will choose. Mm-hmm. The path of wonder or the path of worry. Whatever circumstance, whatever idea, whatever conversation, whatever relationship is ever happening at any time, you get to decide whether it will become wonderful or miserable, terrifying, worrisome.
I think another word would be doubt.
Sure.
Are we choosing, to expand our self-concept in a beautiful way, in a way that is beyond your comfort zone, but in a way that's wonder-filled, in a way that's amazing? Or are we going to doubt that altogether as fantasy?
The only reason we would ever doubt it, ironically, is because we're worried it might not be true.
Right.
And so this is what we find over and over again as you penetrate beneath all these words and layers. you're literally either moving out of love and enjoyment or out of fear and victimhood. We get to choose. So this pathway of wonder, which we've been talking about for weeks now, it's found here today in this angel of celebration. The answer to the question of how do I improve my own self-concept is begin to celebrate your experience. Begin to celebrate yourself. Begin to find all of those many things in your world that ignite a sense of wonder in you. How else are you going to embody growth? This is the way. The angel of celebration walks the pathway of wonder to become the embodiment of growth. What are we trying to do with our self-concept? Grow it. This is how we grow it. Through celebration. A couple of days in a row, a few days back, we talked about what we see in the word celebration. How celebration is this constellation of praise, thanksgiving, and blessing. How anything we celebrate carries with it all of the themes of upliftment that produce a larger life. So anytime we're celebrating anything at all, large or small, whether it's something as massive as a partner or as apparently unimportant as an item, anytime we offer our hearts in celebration to something, we are in that moment married to the best of what life has to offer, the highest possible idea that we can grasp at that moment in time. This is how we begin to marry ourselves to larger ideas. It's by recognizing that larger life all around us. That's what celebration is. The angel of imagination is fascinating to me. After yesterday's day signature, we spoke about the pathway of anticipation in not one but two recordings. There was a lot of insight moving over the course of the day yesterday on this subject of anticipation. What really is the pathway of anticipation? And what we were shown is that the pathway of anticipation is the direct result of this seed of knowing within us. It just knows that something good is coming. It doesn't need to know what. It doesn't need to know when. It doesn't need to know the details. It simply anticipates the best. It assumes the best. And we talked about the prime instinct to imagine yesterday. Now here today we find the angel of imagination. How else and where else are we ever going to assume anything? Your assumptive power, your power to assume anything is in your own imagination. In any case where you are assuming that something will turn out well, that's in your imagination. In any case where you are assuming that something is bound to go badly, that's in your imagination. That power of assumption, that power of anticipation is within you, and it's totally imaginal. It hasn't yet happened.
Right.
So this is our way, the only way we ever get to extend into the future at all. We never get to live in the future, but we do get to anticipate the quality of that future, which is the very thing that calls that future into now. And when it does this, that future arrives now at the level of our expectation. So if we're assuming the best, in every case we will find that we get the best. That even when circumstances are a complete mess and it seems like there's no way out, ultimately everything, like this beautiful symphony of intelligence that we could never have possibly imagined all the details of, everything just happens to our benefit, happens for the purpose of our growth. In any case where we are assuming breakdown, we are bound to meet it, even when things go very well. That's why we have this fear of the other foot falling, because even when we've permitted enough light in that our life begins to move, our doubts and our worries are working very hard to assume that at any point something could fall apart, something could break. And so it does, inevitably. These are all direct results of our use of the imagination. There are productive and beneficial applications of this inner power that we refer to as imagination. And there are very unhelpful applications of that same power.
Yeah.
One of my favorite authors, Neville Goddard, says something to the effect of, your imagination is God. That always blew my mind because he really comes out and says that, you know? It's like, woof. I've spent a lot of time contemplating that, and I understand now what he means because of this angel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really something to consider that we're given our imagination, we're given this ability to celebrate, not as like an ancillary, just sort of meaningless, side bonus thing. It's actually everything that the universe gives us is on purpose, totally efficient. The universe doesn't waste energy on like things that don't matter. The fact that we have these powers, these abilities, is because they're central to our growth. They're central to our existence as creators, our ability to participate, to expand, all of these things. And just because we haven't used them efficiently up until now, or haven't totally understood their importance, doesn't mean that we can't now use them appropriately. And This is exactly what they're for. It's because we've always had this power to choose to use them in the way that they've been intended, which is to, live our best life.
Yes, absolutely. So we're reminded of that today. That's what the day signature comes to recall our attention to in a very real way. This angel of imagination walks the pathway of thanksgiving. If you know absolutely that everything that happens for you, if you know absolutely that whatever may be current for you now, something amazing, something better, something surprising, something that's going to blow your mind beyond anything you could possibly imagine is coming. There's no question that it's coming. The only question is a matter of when, not if. So if you know this and there's zero question, what's left but to say, oh, I'm so excited, thank you. What's left? We don't worry over the order we placed on Amazon. We know it's coming. We just move about our lives knowing that at some point a truck is going to pull up and a driver's going to come out carrying a box and drop it on our doorstep, take a picture and walk away. That's what happens. Yeah. Same thing with life. We get to proactively choose to remember that life works this way too. And as we do, we fortify this awareness within us, which is inherent. Essentially what we're doing is getting all the ideas that doubt it out of the way so that this natural trust can re-emerge. When you're moving from that complete knowing, from that anticipation, all that's left is thanksgiving. There is a direct line connecting yesterday's 41st angel to today's 64th, and this is it. If you know absolutely, you become very excited about your life. You literally walk through life saying thank you. That's what the pathway of thanksgiving is. And the embodiment is prayer. Why? We didn't know why at first. Truly. Like, this was a really interesting angel for us to find the words for, because when the words landed, we knew they were right. We did not understand exactly what they could mean. What is the angel of imagination and what is the embodiment of prayer? We shuffled these words around. We had the angel of thanksgiving on the pathway of imagination. We were all over the place. What we then were shown, of course, was this prayer of amazement that we've shared with you many times before. The prayer of amazement is thank you, I love you. Thank you, I love you. This is all. When you can begin to walk through your life, meeting every moment, every conversation, every experience with this prayer of thank you, I love you, you begin to embody the prayer itself. You become a living prayer. The embodiment of prayer is what happens when this prayer of amazement becomes such a deep part of you that it is now your knee-jerk reaction to experience, where something happens and previously your first thought is like, oh no, or we're screwed, or it's over. That's anticipating the worst. You begin now naturally, instantly, without effort, to assume the best, to anticipate the best. Anything at all could happen. Something that someone else might objectively refer to as uncomfortable or even terrible can happen. And your response to it as a result of your awareness now is thank you. Thank you for this, and thank you for what's coming. Because I absolutely know that whatever this is, it connects to something that benefits everyone, even myself, even everyone around me, even the very people who are so worried that it might not. Imagine a knee-jerk reaction in that direction, where everything that happened was thank you. I'll be honest, I'm not there yet. I want to be. I will be. We all will be. This is what's natural for us. As we walk these pathways, we are establishing this newfound awareness, which roots itself in our bodies. So in addition to the newfound awareness comes the newfound embodiment. Little by little, you find yourself responding to things totally differently than you once reacted to them.
Mm-hmm. And even if there's a temporary reaction, it calls your attention to that feeling to be able to then move in the opposite direction much more quickly, to recover from that much more quickly and recognize, the Thanksgiving.
All of these conversations and all of these words are like lights. Flashlights. They're shining on something we previously hadn't seen. So this is actually a really important thing to say. You're going to leave this conversation hopefully feeling totally inspired and excited to live like this. And within minutes or hours, something's going to happen and you're going to find yourself spinning with worry or whatever it is. And then you're going to think, oh, dang, I screwed up. No, you didn't. Every time you experience something which is uncomfortable from this point forward, you're going to meet this opportunity to see it for what it is because of this conversation. This gift of seeing it for what it is the very thing that allows us to choose differently, because when we meet that moment and we think, uh-oh, we then think, yeah, but do I want to be married to the uh-oh? Am I married to this turning out badly? Heck no, I do not want to be married to that outcome.
Right.
Instead, I'm going to choose to lean into what I've come to know. I'm going to choose to use what I've learned. And I'm going to choose to assume that even though I can't see how right now, this thing becomes something better than I could imagine. And this thing is necessary for that something better to unfold in my experience. Regardless of what I see, I'm going to choose to marry myself to the best possible outcome I can imagine. And I'm going to expect life to outdo that expectation.
Yes.
That's awesome. That is a great power. It is going to demand great power from you, great strength, great courage, great creativity, great involvement. But this is what we've wanted.
Discipline, again.
Discipline, there it is,
that
yes.
Word regarding the 4, that discipline is to choose wonder over worry.
That's exactly what it is.
And it takes a lot sometimes. It does
absolutely.
take discipline, especially in the beginning when you're just practicing it. But as time goes on, you begin to see real evidence of how that absolutely produces the better outcome.
Yes, that discipline is going to be massively reinforced by friendly support, help. We're fortunate to have one another. Lara helps me daily, and I help her to the best of my ability daily. You deserve the same, whether it's from these videos, whether it's from seer training. That's the best way that I can think of for anyone who's on board with what we're sharing, to really dig their heels in and get to work in an accelerated fashion. But in any case, this discipline that is being called for here is a willingness to choose differently than you have before, to assume differently than you have before. Moving forward from this conversation, I've been so excited to talk about this 64th angel since we met it, since it became clear what was happening. Because moving forward from this conversation, you absolutely will become increasingly more aware of how your own imagination moves. And if you're like most of us, you're going to find that imagination has been trained to move in the wrong direction almost all the time. And so you're going to meet this as an opportunity to retrain it. And as you do this, you're going to find that your release of those old patterns creates the space for far more natural, far more inherent, latent patterns to finally move again. That atrophy starts to move again. It is no longer latent. It has the opportunity and the space to do what it does, which is always going to be perfectly aligned with the largest possible story you could live out, with the greatest possible expression of yourself. And so you start to assume the best where previously you would have assumed the worst. You start to assume that you are capable in areas where you previously assumed you were not. You start to assume that you are beautiful and perfect just as you are in areas where you previously expected that you would have to get to some great deal of hard work in order to even get your head above water. This is a whole new way of life that is being described by the angels. We know how fundamental self-concept is. We have this great big question. We're all kind of like waiting with bated breath to find the answer. And the answer is celebrate your life. Enjoy the miracle that is your life. Look into the mirror and be glad. It's like, wait a minute. That doesn't sound hard. That doesn't sound hard or scary at all. In fact, that is the gentlest, most delicious path to get from the most miserable place to the best possible place. What could be a more exciting response to the question than celebrate, give thanks, live the prayer of amazement? I am amazed every single time we talk about this, every single time we revisit this awareness, that the answer to the big question could not be more simple, could not be more obvious, and could not be more accessible. And the only ones capable of permitting it for any given one of us is ourselves. Only you permit that for you. Only I permit that for me. But we get to work together to remember how this works when we're in those circumstances or situations that feel like there's no way out. You're always joking about Mission Impossible. Yeah. It's what it reminds me of. You tell them what you tell me.
Well, the movies, this, franchise of Mission Impossible movies, there's like 6 of them. Every movie's the same. And in every single movie, there's this, there's all these scenarios where it looks like there is no way that, Tom Cruise is going to be able to get out of this one. It's right down to like the last millisecond that everything is like decimated, the whole planet blows up, something crazy like that. But every single time it works out flawlessly, not only okay, but absolutely flawlessly. And it's, the whole time Tom Cruise is completely confident that it will.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me. It's a perfect metaphor, and I love it, especially because what you realize is that what Tom Cruise knew is that it was up to him to empower himself to choose that best outcome, to be able to see that there's one path, and even though it looks like a sliver of a path, if he's on that path, then there is literally nothing that can stop, him.
Yes. That path in this case is the path of anticipation. One of my favorite lines in whatever one of those movies it was is when he was asked by his teammates, like, how do you expect to get out of this? And his response was, you probably know exactly what it was.
I'll figure it out.
He knows in this movie, he knows so completely that whatever happens, he will be able to walk that line. There's no question that he'll get through it in his mind. That's the same degree of conviction and confidence that we get to exhibit the moment we've truly come to know the truth underlying all this.
Yes.
That's why we show up day after day to say the same basic thing over and over again. It's why the angels have lined themselves up like 64 dominoes, all saying the same thing. Every one of them using different words to say, hey, you get to enjoy your life. Hey, it's not hard. Hey, it doesn't need to be difficult or scary or painful. Hey, your purpose is enjoyment. Like, wow.
Yep.
And we need to hear it every time.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're watching these movies, it's almost like most of the movie is a series of things going wrong. But that's never what it leads to. It is always leading to the best possible outcome.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what Tom Cruise is demonstrating, is this discipline to always choose that best outcome, the discipline to not succumb to the worry or the doubts.
Yes. Because they are always dead wrong. That's the thing that just continues to amaze me as well. It's like, and the movies represent this beautifully. It's not just that in every movie he barely survives. It's that in every movie he not only survives, but also saves the world and also becomes famous or rich or something. It's always like, dang, I'd have been fine just to like survive by the skin of my teeth. And it's so much more every time. That's the same for us over and over again as we submit ourselves to this greater intelligence, to this larger story, to this underlying truth. We will find that not only is the worst case scenario not destined to play out, but the best case scenario is better than we could have imagined. And I think that's the fun of this angel of imagination. inviting us to kind of play this game with our experience. Like, give me the best you can imagine so that I can give you more than that. That's what the angel of imagination does, which is why it's on the pathway of Thanksgiving, because you'll not only get what you imagine, you'll get something that fills you with wonder and amazement and awe in these words that we've been meeting day after day. It's not just going to get better. It's going to be the best, and you've never met that. And the moment you arrive at that, it's going to continue. That is quite a story to tell, but that's what is being told here by the signature and the angels and all of these themes today. So how much are you willing to receive? How widely are you willing to open your heart? How completely are you willing to open your heart to the promise that is life? The angel of promise showed up for us today in our virtual oracle spread.
Yep.
And how willing are you to discipline yourself to recognize when you're married to something that doesn't serve you, and to creatively consider what an alternative might be? Is that discipline at all? Or is that opportunity? Is that autonomy? Is that personal power? Another word for discipline would be self-empowerment.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I like the word discipline for what it is, but in this context, understand what it means. And that's what it means. You get to do that. Moment by moment, day after day, there is no exception to the rule. We all get to work together moving forward into this day to train our imagination in the opposite direction of what it's known, to assume the best, and then to witness that best surprise us, unfolding before our very eyes in ways we never could have imagined that it would. This is an awesome day.
Yeah.
It's a day of celebration. Is there anything you'd like to add before we conclude?
I don't think so. I think we nailed it.
Oh, I remembered one thing.
But
one of the exact matches to today's frequency is occupy your heaven. And I remember seeing that and thinking, that's the summary phrase right there. If we tie everything up in a perfect bow and give you a single phrase to walk away with, this is it. It is the invitation. It is the command. It is the imperative to occupy your heaven. Show up to it. Claim it. Be in it. That's what we're going to choose to do. And then tomorrow we'll meet again for yet more of the same amazing discovery. Yeah. Good.
Sounds good.
Enjoy occupying your heaven. We will too.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye for now.